Theodore Harlan lived in a house worth $9 million at the end of a private road in Pasadena, California. He had a gate, a garden, a housekeeper who came twice a week, and a cardiologist on retainer. He had everything a man could reasonably want in his 60s. And yet for the past 3 years, his hands would not stop shaking. Not violently, not the kind of shaking that made people stare. Just a fine, persistent tremor that started around midday and faded by evening. His doctors had run every test they could think of. Parkinson's panel, thyroid function, blood pressure monitoring, neurological screening. Everything came back normal. His cardiologist told him to cut back on coffee. His neurologist told him it was probably stress. His internist said the same thing she always said. "You are 61 years old, Mr. Harlan, and your body is simply changing. Get more sleep. Eat more vegetables. Take a walk." Theodore did not tell any of them about the bourbon. It was not a large amount. That was what he told himself. 2 glasses in the evening, sometimes 3. Always the same brand, always poured precisely to the same level, always consumed in the same leather chair by the same window that looked out over the same garden. It was a ritual, not a problem. There was a difference. He had read enough about alcoholism to know that he did not fit the profile. He was functional. He was successful. He ran a private equity firm that managed $8 billion in assets. He dressed well, spoke carefully, never missed a meeting. The shaking was just stress. The insomnia was just age. The way his appetite had disappeared over the past year was just his metabolism adjusting. He believed this completely. Sylvia Pruitt arrived on a Tuesday morning in early October, carrying a canvas bag with a broken zipper and driving a 2011 Ford Escape with a dent in the rear bumper that she had never gotten around to fixing. She was 47. With brown hair she kept pulled back during work hours and gray, starting at her temples that she had stopped trying to cover. She had been cooking professionally for 20 years, the last 8 as a private chef for hire, going wherever the work was and staying as long as she was needed. The agency had called her about Theodore on a Friday. The previous cook had left without notice, and the client needed someone immediately. The pay was good. The hours were reasonable. He was described as quiet, private, and not particularly interested in food. That last detail should have told her something. The house was large and carefully maintained, the kind of house where everything was in its place but nothing felt lived in. She found the kitchen stocked with expensive ingredients that had clearly been purchased by someone other than Theodore. The pantry was too orderly. The spices arranged alphabetically in identical glass jars, every label facing forward. It looked like a photograph of a kitchen rather than a kitchen where someone actually cooked. Theodore met her at the door and shook her hand. He was tall, lean in the way that men who have lost weight without meaning to are lean, with gray hair cut short and eyes that were alert but careful. He wore khaki trousers and a button-down shirt, both ironed, nothing expensive. He looked more like a retired professor than one of the wealthiest men in Pasadena. He showed her around the kitchen with the manner of someone giving a tour of a room they rarely entered. "I eat dinner at 7, he said. "Nothing heavy. I don't have much of an appetite lately." He paused at the counter, ran one hand along the edge of it. "The last person made things that were too complicated. I just need something simple." "Simple is fine," Sylvia said. He nodded once and left the kitchen. She did not see him again until 7 o'clock, when she set a plate of roasted chicken and vegetables on the dining room table and knocked on the door of his study to let him know it was ready. He thanked her without looking up from his desk. When she cleared the table an hour later, the plate was mostly untouched. This was how it went for the first 2 weeks. She cooked. He appeared briefly, thanked her politely, and disappeared again. The plates came back with food still on them. She tried different things. Lighter dishes, soup, a pasta she knew from experience that almost everyone found comforting. He ate a few bites of each and left the rest. She mentioned it once, carefully, and he told her his appetite had always been like this and she should not take it personally. She did not take it personally, but she started paying attention. It was the small things that accumulated. She noticed that the recycling bin in the utility room, which she passed every morning on her way to the kitchen, contained a precise number of empty glass bottles each week, always the same brand, always exactly 6. 6 bottles in 7 days. She noticed that the tremor in his hands, which she first saw when he signed a check for a household expense, was worse in the morning than in the evening, the opposite of what caffeine would cause. She noticed that he kept a glass of water on his desk at all times and drank it constantly, the way people do when their mouth is always dry. She noticed that his study smelled faintly of something sharp and sweet, and that the smell was strongest in the morning, when whatever he had consumed the night before was still working its way out of him. She noticed that he never drank in front of her. Never once in 2 weeks had she seen him pour a drink, offer one, or acknowledge that there was any alcohol in the house, but the bottles appeared in the bin every week with the regularity of a clock. Sylvia had grown up with a father who drank. She knew what managed drinking looked like from the outside. She knew the routines people built around it, the careful systems they constructed to keep it invisible, the precise number of bottles, the timing, the way the shaking was worse before the first drink of the day settled the nerves back into place. She did not say anything. It was not her place. She was his cook, not his doctor, not his family. He was a grown man and a private one, and she had been hired to prepare meals, not to observe him. But the meals kept coming back uneaten. On a Wednesday evening in mid-October, she was cleaning the kitchen after dinner when she heard something she had not heard before in the house. Not a crash, not a raised voice, but a sound that was almost worse, a long exhale, the kind that comes from someone who has been holding something in for a very long time and has simply run out of the ability to hold it anymore. The sound came from the hallway just outside the kitchen door. Sylvia dried her hands and walked to the door and opened it. Theodore was standing in the hallway with one hand against the wall. His face was pale and there was sweat at his temples. His other hand hung at his side, and even from where she stood she could see the tremor. It was bad tonight, worse than usual. He looked at her and said nothing. "Mr. Harlan," she said. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." His voice was steady. That surprised her. "You don't look fine." He almost smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Thank you for the dinner," he said. "You can head home for the evening." Sylvia did not move. "Have you eaten anything today?" He considered the question. "Lunch," he said, which she understood to mean no. "Sit down," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Something passed across his face that she could not quite name, surprise maybe, or the recognition that he was too tired to argue. He sat down. She went back into the kitchen and made him a bowl of plain rice with a soft-boiled egg and a little butter, the kind of thing her mother used to make when someone was not well. She brought it out to the hallway table because that was where he had sat, and she did not want him to move. He ate it, all of it. That was the first time he had finished anything she made. He set the bowl down and looked at it for a moment. "I haven't been hungry," he said. "I know," Sylvia said. He looked up at her. She kept her expression neutral. He was intelligent. She could see him processing what she had not said. "Whatever you think you've noticed," he said, "I want you to understand that I have it under control." "I'm sure you do," she said. He studied her face. She did not look away. "My father used to say the same thing," she said. Not unkindly, just as a fact. Theodore did not respond. She picked up the empty bowl and went back to the kitchen and let him sit with that for as long as he needed. He did not bring it up again that night, neither did she. But the next evening when she arrived, there were only 5 bottles in the recycling bin instead of 6. She did not count them, obviously. She just noticed. On a Thursday evening 3 weeks later, Theodore came into the kitchen while she was cooking. He did not usually come into the kitchen. He stood near the doorway with his hands in his pockets and watched her work for a moment, and then he said, "My daughter is coming for dinner Sunday." Sylvia adjusted the heat under the pan. "How many guests?" "Just her. Her name is Sophie. She's 32. He paused. "She doesn't know about." He stopped. "About?" Sylvia asked, not looking up from the stove. "About any of it," he said. "She thinks I've been tired, overworked." Sylvia moved the pan to the back burner. She turned around and looked at him directly. "Has she asked?" Theodore's jaw tightened. "She worries too much already." "That's not the same as not asking." He looked at her for a long moment. He had a way of looking at people that was very still, very considered, the look of a man who had spent decades in rooms where every word carried weight. But there was something behind it tonight that she recognized. It was the same thing she had seen in her father's face when the pretending became more exhausting than the truth. "She lost her mother 8 years ago," Theodore said finally. "I don't want her to lose me too. Not like this." Sylvia was quiet for a moment. "How does she lose you? If she doesn't know." Theodore turned and walked back to his study. She let him go. That Sunday, Sophie Harlan arrived at 6 o'clock, with a bottle of wine she had chosen carefully, and a kind of watchful attentiveness that told Sylvia everything she needed to know about how the daughter saw her father. Sophie was warm and polite and asked Sylvia twice about the food in a way that was really asking about him. She watched Theodore's hands. She watched how much he ate. She laughed at his jokes and kept her worry carefully folded and put away, the way people do when they have been worried for a long time and have learned to keep it from the person they are worried about. Theodore ate more that night than any night since Sylvia had started. Not everything, but more. After Sophie left, he stood in the kitchen doorway again. He did this when he had something to say that he had not yet decided to say. "She noticed," he said. "Of course she did," Sylvia said. He was quiet. Outside, Sophie's car was pulling out of the driveway. "My wife used to notice everything," he said. "I thought after she was gone I could." He stopped again. He seemed to do this a lot, stop in the middle of the sentence that mattered and redirect to one that didn't. "I thought things would be simpler. Were they?" "No." He looked at his hands. The tremor was there, faint but visible. "I told myself it was grief. Then I told myself it was pressure. Then I stopped telling myself anything, and it was just the routine." Sylvia turned off the last burner and dried her hands and faced him. "My father told himself the same things," she said, "right up until he didn't have to tell himself anymore." Theodore looked at her. "What happened to him?" "He quit," she said. "At 64, after his second hospitalization. He's 71 now. He tends a garden and he calls me every Sunday and he still thinks about it every day." She folded the dish towel. "He says the hardest part was admitting that the routine had become something he needed." Theodore said nothing for a long time. Then he turned and went back to his study, and Sylvia gathered her things and let herself out. But in the recycling bin by the door, there were 4 bottles that week, and then 3. And then the week after that, she found herself counting them and realizing there were none. She did not say anything about this. She simply made a better breakfast. It was a Monday morning in November when things became impossible to ignore. Sylvia arrived at her usual time and let herself in, and was halfway to the kitchen when she heard something that stopped her completely. It was coming from the sitting room at the end of the hall, a voice, low and unsteady, reading something out loud. She stood very still and listened. Theodore was reading a letter. His voice caught on certain phrases, went smooth on others. She could not make out the words, but she could hear in the cadence of his voice something she had not heard there before. He was not performing steadiness. He was not managing her perception of him. He was simply a man alone in a room, reading something that mattered and falling apart quietly around the edges of it. She went into the kitchen and started the coffee, and did not go near the sitting room. An hour later, he appeared in the kitchen doorway. His eyes were red, but his face was composed. He sat down at the kitchen table, which he had never done before. He always ate in the dining room. Sylvia set a cup of coffee in front of him and sat down across from him. She did not ask what he had been reading. She did not ask if he was all right. She just sat there. After a long time, he said, "It was a letter from my wife. I found it last year in the back of a drawer. She wrote it. Before, when she knew, she wrote me things she had not said out loud." He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "The tremor was bad this morning. She told me she was afraid of what I would do without her. She said I had always used work as the place I put everything I could not say." He looked at the table. "She was right." Sylvia did not speak. "I told myself the drinking was temporary," Theodore continued, "just until the worst of it passed. But the worst of it did not pass, and by the time I understood that, it had been 18 months, and I had built a whole architecture around it. The timing, the amount, the recycling, the routine of it." He looked up at her. "You knew, yes," she said. "For how long?" "The second week." He exhaled. "And you didn't say anything." "It wasn't my place," she said. "It's still not. But you're sitting at my kitchen table at 8 in the morning because you've been reading a letter from your wife and your hands won't stop shaking, and I think maybe today it's close enough to my place." He almost smiled. His eyes were still red. "My wife would have liked you," he said. "Tell me about her," Sylvia said. And he did. For the better part of an hour, Theodore Harlan talked about a woman named Joan, who had been a botanist and a terrible driver, and a ferocious reader, who had loved the garden he now could not bring himself to tend properly, who had left him a letter in the back of a drawer because she knew him well enough to know he would not be ready to read it until he needed it more than he needed his pride. He talked about her the way people talk about someone they have kept locked up for too long, the way the words come quickly at first and then slowly like something thawing. Sylvia listened. She made more coffee. She let him finish. When he finally stopped, there was a quiet in the kitchen that felt different from the usual quiet of the house, less empty. "I have a name," Sylvia said. "A colleague of mine. A chef, actually, not a doctor. Her husband went through something similar 3 years ago. She referred him to a therapist who specializes in this. Not a program, not inpatient. Just a person who knows how to help you build something different, 1 week at a time." She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "I wrote it down this morning. I wasn't going to give it to you unless you asked. Why are you giving it to me now? Because you sat down," she said, "in my kitchen, which means something." Theodore looked at the piece of paper. He did not pick it up right away. He just looked at it. "I don't know what Sophie would say," he said quietly. "If she knew." "I think she'd say she already knows," Sylvia said, "and she's been waiting for you to say it first." He put his hand over the piece of paper and held it there for a moment. Then he folded it once and put it in his shirt pocket. He did not say thank you. He did not say anything. He stood up, put his coffee cup in the sink with a steadiness that cost him something, and walked back down the hallway. Sylvia sat at the kitchen table a little longer. Then she got up and started on breakfast, because that was what she was there for, and because she had learned a long time ago that the most useful thing you can do for someone in the middle of a hard thing is simply to keep showing up. 2 weeks later, he told her he had made an appointment. He mentioned it the way he mentioned everything important, briefly, as he was already turning to leave. "I have an appointment Thursday," he said. "Someone my daughter's doctor recommended." Sylvia did not look up from the cutting board. "Good," she said. He hesitated in the doorway. "Sophie knows. How did she take it?" she cried, he said. Then she asked me why I hadn't told her sooner. He was quiet for a moment. I didn't have a good answer. "You don't need one," Sylvia said. "Just the appointment." He nodded once and left. In the months that followed, the house changed in the small ways that matter most. Theodore started coming into the garden on weekend mornings, not to do anything in particular, just to be there. He started eating breakfast at the kitchen table. He started asking Sylvia questions about what she was cooking, about where she had worked before, about her kids, who were 17 and 14 and drove her to distraction in the way that beloved children do. He listened the way people listen when they have recently been reminded that other people have entire lives happening beside their own. The tremor in his hands faded over weeks. Not all at once, not dramatically. Just slowly, the way things heal when they are finally given the right conditions. Sophie came for dinner more often. She and her father sat in the dining room long after the food was cleared, talking in the way they had probably not talked since before June died. Openly, not the careful management of worry. Just two people working out what they owed each other and what they had been too frightened to say. One evening in February, Sylvia was finishing in the kitchen when Sophie appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame the same way her father did, and Sylvia thought that people carry their parents in their bodies in ways they do not always know. "Thank you," Sophie said, "for whatever you did." Sylvia shook her head. "I made dinner. You made him eat it," Sophie said. "That's not the same thing." Sylvia smiled and did not argue. She thought about her father, who tended his garden now and called every Sunday and had told her once, years after the worst of it, that the thing that finally shifted something in him was not the hospitalization, not the doctor, not the program. It was a Sunday afternoon when his neighbor came over to fix a fence and stayed for 3 hours and talked to him the way someone talks to a person they expect to still be there next year. He had needed someone to expect something of him. She turned off the kitchen light and picked up her bag and said good night to Sophie, and on her way out she passed the utility room and did not stop to look at the recycling bin, because she already knew what she would not find there. Theodore was standing on the back porch when she passed the window, looking out at the garden in the February dark. He had his hands in his pockets, and his shoulders were level and still. She did not stop to say good night. She had learned that some moments belong entirely to the person standing in them, and the most respectful thing you can do is simply let them be. She walked to her car and drove home. On the way, she called her father. He picked up on the second ring, the way he always did. Sometimes the thing that costs the most is not the asking for help. It is the years spent convincing yourself that you are the kind of person who does not need it, and then the morning you sit down in someone else's kitchen and discover that you were wrong, and that being wrong is not the end of anything, but the start of something quieter and more real.